Welcome to the In Shape Fitness Show. I am Coach Kim, and today's podcast is a podcast about fitness and technology. It's kind of all the rage to talk about the different ways that we can accumulate data and adjust our fitness regimen and our sort of adherence to our compliance to fitness, to workouts with the use of various forms of technology, whether it's, programs that you can download to your phone and track things, or obviously there are technologies that help, that actually, operate things like cardio machines and so on and so forth. And there are a lot of really amazing technologies. I mean, this is not a podcast knocking fitness technologies, but it dawned on me. I was actually in a conversation that didn't really involve fitness technology today. And the concept was on the automation of different sort of computerized systems in the city of New York. I'm a running coach and a health expert, but I'm also a public school parent and the president of an advocacy and elected a council of parent advocates in Manhattan. And one of the things that we get frustrated with sometimes is how, we're hyper automated in some ways, and then we're sort of really, we've got these really like sort of human legacy types of systems as well. And the thing that really is striking to me I was thinking about it in terms of fitness. A little while ago, I was just talking to someone about how we were, feeding into the technologies. We're human beings that are creating the technologies, and then we're the human beings that are benefiting or suffering from the technologies in some cases on the other side, right? So if you think about fitness technology, and I'm going to use just tracking of your steps, kind of like the apps, the heart app on an iPhone or a Fitbit or some other way to measure the amount of movement that you make, your forward movement on a day-to-day basis. It's maybe going to help you, but in some cases, it may not necessarily help you in the way that you think it is, and it could sort of prevent you from doing other things, right? So we do become somewhat connected, like overtly or kind of overly connected to the data that is being fed to us, and so it's a little bit tricky. It's a constant battle of a check and balance over what is best for a person in any given situation. So that's what I'm talking about today. I already sort of jumped on into it, but the reason that I want to talk about it today is because fitness technology has become such a huge part of fitness. I mean, the fitness business, I'm sure is just, a multi-billion dollar business. In fact, I was just looking at Market Watch, the very reliable source of a lot of data for the way that companies, industries operate, and the amount of money, especially younger people that we're spending hundreds of thousands individually, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars over our lifetimes on our exercise regimens. There are, and that's on like the median, in like the mathematical mean range, where if you think about the fact that there is a huge number, in fact, a majority of Americans do not exercise on a regular basis at all. Now, we know a lot of unused gym memberships. That I think the stat is something like $1.2 billion every year is spent on gym membership fees for memberships that are never used. I don't know how people know how we know that one statistic. I'm not exactly sure, but we know that people buy their gym memberships, right, and don't go. By January, I think it's 19th is the day that we know that by then New Year's resolutions are kind of already starting to waver. So we know that there's a huge number of Americans that don't spend any money on their sort of like proactive health, on taking care of their bodies. Their health money may be spent on the back end on trying to improve their health afterwards, or sort of medical conditions related to health. But at the top end, of course, there are lots and lots and lots of people that spend thousands of dollars per per month. It will even go so far as saying, since I'm in a kind of a boutique business where people pay me privately to go and work with them, and so they're really high end expenditures. And then the majority of Americans aren't spending anything. Here's the stat I was actually looking for, which is $3.4 trillion globally on the wellness market. That industry, the Global Wellness Institute is the industry organization that was able to put that number together, which is a 100% increase in healthy eating and in wellness as a whole. So it's a really, really significant amount of money that we're spending in our sort of in our economic atmosphere of lots of different things. But the technology part of it, the wearables, as we've come to call them, are fascinating to me, because I wrote about the start of the pedometer in my book, Darwin on the Treadmill, and I really think it's kind of amusing and really interesting to think about the way that humans were just, we're curious. We know that movement is such an important variable in terms of long-term health, in terms of long-term fitness and quality of life. We know that the pedometer goes back to this concept of how, actually, as I understood it through the research that I did for the book, it goes back a lot farther than the 1964 Olympics. But it was in the 1964 Olympics which was being hosted by Tokyo, that the Japanese may have been the first to market this type of fitness wearable. And it turns out that the Japanese, who have this pride in their sort of their attention to detail, their attention to organization and to control over their bodies, right? They take pride in the way that they eat, the way that they look, the way that they care for their homes, their clothes, their gardens, all very sort of detail orientation of the Japanese culture is I guess was something that was on the minds of people when they were planning the 1964 Olympics, because by the 60s, the Japanese culture was evolving, at least some thought, away from, they were westernizing a little bit. After World War II, they were starting to, women were starting to enter the workforce. The Western ways were starting to creep in, which meant that there was less time being spent in their home. More time was being spent making money and doing things outside of the home. So when the Olympics started to plan around having the Olympics in Tokyo in 1964, it turns out that there was this Japanese watchmaker, a man named Yamasa Tokai, who noticed this change that was happening within their culture. So I guess I didn't say this overtly, but maybe you can envision that what they were with the Western values, what was also happening was that the Japanese were starting to gain weight a little bit. He observed this. His own waistline is said to have been expanding as well. But what we don't know, or what we do know, is that he was the first, his invention, which he called the Mampokai, or Mampoke, I guess, which is literally translated to 10,000 steps a day, was his product that he created ahead of the 1964 Olympics. Let's walk 10,000 steps a day. And he created this little device that could be worn, and it's said that in Japan, to this day, in fact, the phrase gets uttered in a way that sometimes we would say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Walking 10,000 steps a day is something that he recognized to be a critical component to reversing some of the Western effects that he assumed was starting to happen to people. And this was interesting because it was in the 1964 Olympics that were first televised on TV. And so I guess some of the thinking, at least in terms of this watchmaker, also it had to do with the fact that they, the host of the Olympics was going to present their own culture, their own civilized, their own civilization to the world, and so they were. He was concerned about that, and the Mampoke was the product. The first wearable thus came out, and being able to measure. And we of course use this a lot in our discussions with people today about how many steps a day one should take. So I talk about the fitness, sort of the technology of fitness, and how compliant it seems like we try to be, though we know, of course, that most people are not compliant with that measurement, right? It's not necessarily 10,000 steps a day that is referenced all the time. I think it really depends on the lifestyle that you live, your age, obviously your structural capabilities, and so on. But that is one metric that's really can be really useful in terms of the quality of your life. If you are looking to be super mobile, looking to be able to do the kinds of things in your life that you want to be able to do, being able to walk that 10,000 steps is definitely something that we should take seriously. However, there are actually, before I get to the however part, I want to just go back for 1 second, because the other thing that I think is really fascinating, just in case you're curious about the history, because I'm always curious about how the history interacts with the way that we view technology today as, computing devices and algorithms and, like really giant databases and such. But it is said that Leonardo da Vinci also spec'd out a device that would be able to measure steps that soldiers took, back in the, 15th century. Apparently this somewhat of a, like, I guess, some kind of device that had a lever, maybe some, I'm not exactly sure how it would have worked, but apparently there was an actual thing, this sort of string that was attached to the pant leg of a person. So when one walked, there was a crank, and it counted the number of actual steps that one was taking. Nowadays, of course, we have satellites, and therefore GPS not just knows steps taken because step length is different, but we actually know steps, and we know distance, and we know so many other different things. So it's really, really fascinating. And I think that having that data is super helpful for small kind of like on the ground markers that you can lay out for yourself in terms of planning the way that you conduct every day of your life or every month of your life, depending on what your preferences are for planning out a calendar and then sticking to the plan, implementing your own goals. But the other thing that is a cautionary tale is something else that I experience, where I deal with a lot of other clients, that particularly running competitive clients, that kind of go overboard with their use of technology. And so this concept, back to what I was talking about from the very beginning of the podcast here, when I was talking about what happened this morning in a conversation that involved government, the use of technology in the running of different government agencies, and how consumers and citizens are affected by the technology, the intelligence that we create. It's really important that we try to understand, even if we can't truly understand it, the fact that humans are on both ends of absolutely everything that we create. If we get beyond the point where humanity is the driver of the technology, if we can't get beyond the biases that we have, and create technologies that are the most helpful for the people that we're serving, the people that we're working with, then we're into, we're in some trouble there. But as it stands right now, we haven't sort of taken that leap into like the Terminator movies or whatever, where machines are, kind of destroying humans. But we are, and so we are still at a place where human beings are the drivers and the conductors they create the inputs, create the technologies, and then we benefit or suffer from the technologies. So when we look on a microcosmic level at any piece of information that we're getting from a technology that we're using, whether it is the virtual trainer program that we use when I coach long distance runners for half marathons and marathons, there are pieces of information that you put into a computer that pertains to the number of miles that you have run in the past, the number of the pace that you typically run, and so on and so forth, your age, your weight, and then the outputs, the things that you receive, are these suggested parameters for the schedule that you will be using in order to reach a particular goal. Now, adherence to or compliance to those recommendations, is good, right? It's great. And in fact, there are ways to make adjustments even along the way, but it is not the police of you, right? It's not like the end all break off for absolutely everything that you're doing within the construct of your running interests. And so being aware of your own control over your own technology and the humanity that is ultimately the goal, right? The human experience, the human interaction is just as important, is more important than the information, that the data that you're either putting in or taking out of any of these systematic technologies. So I caution you, as you use these programs, as you use the wearables, as you look at the heart. I'm not a big fan of GPS or some of the other, what are they called? The wearables, Fitbits and the like, the Garmins and that sort of stuff. I don't wear any of those things when I'm off and I'm running. Now I'm coaching, so I always have my phone on me. And by virtue of having my iPhone with me at all times, that means that the heart app on the Apple device is, always logging the stuff that I'm doing. And so I do glance at it every once in a while just to kind of get a sense for what I'm up to, especially if it comes down to my having to sit through a series of meetings or do something really, really sedentary in a particular day, that I try to buffer that with activities that, kind of fill in the rest of the rest of my schedule. But it is definitely never kind of, it's a piece of information that sits out there. It is never the driver of the choices that I make directly. And when I'm out of compliance with, the things that I think are generally good for me, I don't sweat it. And I encourage you not to sweat it, because it really is about you and your own experience, you and your own body, you and your own life, your family, sort of living your life through your devices, through the information and the technologies that are helpful to you, is, without having that check and balance for what's really happening in your own existence, is where we get into that sort of treacherous zone where technology kind of takes over, and the love, the joy of your health, the magic of experiences that I always, that are the best parts of physical health. The humanity, the unity in terms of being with other people that you care about, whether you are playing a volleyball game on a beach, running a marathon, or maybe, a 5K, or tossing a Frisbee in the park, or maybe, I don't know, going for a bike ride with someone that you love. It's the experience, the activity, the ability to enjoy being alive and being healthy enough to enjoy your life. That is ultimately the goal. The technology helps us get there, and we want to use it, but we don't want it to be the driver in the driver's seat. So I am Coach Kim from InShape Fitness. Happy to entertain any questions that you have about fitness technologies, fitness, the wearables or some of the apps. We, of course, use a database of exercises here at InShape Fitness. Our exercise database is several hundred exercises, none of which include equipment. So we zero in based on the 8 defined priorities of movements that we use to combine or to program our exercise regimens. And the database includes exercises that sort of fit within those parameters. Nothing super unusual. In fact, if you listen to our workouts or use the muscle maintenance routines as some of your workouts, this. We're talking about planks and push-ups and squats and lunges and leg kicks and, flexibility work, all kinds of different movement varieties, but variations on those movement varieties that take it to such a high number of actual exercise, but again, without using any equipment. So we use a database of exercises as well. But again, I tell people, all of our clients, learn. This is a tool. We try to teach you how to do these movements. We try to teach you how to sequence the movements, and then it's up to you to make it happen, to enjoy it, to get into the sort of suffering of it, and the positive production of health as a result of your using the technologies that we have at our resources that we have. So have a great day, and I will see you again real soon.